cyberspace, no address legal questions, implement NSA cyber defense, people need to be a model of international cooperation. The plan ensures accountability in accordance with international law and set for the application of international cyber operation requires clear attribution, states increasingly rely on private sector knowledge, innovation, efficiency, however, excluding contracts and conditional oversight, questions to ensure transparency. It's difficult to determine under what condition the state has responsibility cyber PSC, strong international law, due to this nature, designates them as responsibilities, however, non-military, significant should be moved to Germany, any tackling to war, strong incentive to allocate authority, private company, government, and northern without oversight, companies should not be able to authorize cyber operation that could lead to conflict and immediate confusion and escalation becomes more likely. Lack of regulation ensures escalation. Law 416, historically, private use are hard to control. Licensing will be seen as hostile. They may be discovered. Capable adversaries can see attack back, distinguish between a contractor and the U.S. will reveal hard for the cloud. And 10 compound houses started practicing worst case analysis by dependent private team activists versus unintentional setting off. And escalatory spiral. They cascade and trigger false readings as leaders of skeptical information. Clear 19, escalation risk cascading cyber strikes against infrastructure. All powers along the corona create deploy weapons attacks into escalation of attacks against vital infrastructure, leading to kinetic attacks, risking conflict, a cyber attack, the nuclear war, proxy terrorist provoke a global crisis, cyber housing, false readings of missiles, dangers of accidents, scare, and extinction. Star 14, even though small nuclear war include catastrophic destruction of climate, ozone layer, nuclear weapons will be destroyed, the human race cause extreme launch damage, which will leave the northern inhabitable nuclear power supply use smoke or dies in form of stratospheric smoke layer, plus sunlight, creating ice age conditions. Intense cold, limited growing seasons, kill most humans, electromagnetic composed, destroy commercial power plants, every nuclear reactor, and instantly melt down, releasing radioactivity survivors would starve to death. Even a successful nuclear first strike would perish. Nuclear would perish from nuclear famine to the rest of humanity. And allies say yes. And 14, ILC's draft on state responsibility to trust ambiguity regulation 5 should be applied. The cybersecurity contracting articles made north of the unbelievable times NATO states subsequent highly negotiation international support can become as standards. NATO's position to an example as state dependence on cyber increase global regulation cooperate as best practices. It's NC3A's responsibility. And 14, NATO's NC3 plays an instrumental role in acquisition PSC NATO programs which include cybersecurity awarded for NC3 and NATO's contracts as a precedent for contracting PSC's contention to its standards. Despite Ukraine, US NATO relations remain volatile, permanent, durable signals of commitment are crucial to calling deals enabling effective cooperation. Bennett, 22, Biden wanted to put some Trump area of Russian cooperation. America's back leaders asked how little anxiety among us not going away even after European leaders sense of commitment rings a whole midterm campaigns added to urgency that the US will bolster to a NATO before a possible shift. The planned signal of consultation and PMC further prevents allied fears through cooperation. Killstrom 11, evidence indicates the US inclination to hire PMCs of European allies is documented. There's lack of flexible reserves in trading PMCs bypass neutral countries but attracted to European allies. Substituting contribution of PMC dangerous help NATO to adore different perceptions of NATO's will not change by making a frustration in order to achieve cohesion. NATO must consist of fragments where PMC may severely hurt the legitimacy of the alliance. Alliance promotes democratic allies, encourage consultation, build trust, and prevent conflict. Allies must consistently unified where consistency or preventing successful development of legitimate international action depend upon NATO dimensions of feedback. PMC has severely challenged principles with their legitimacy. Use PMC with the NATO cohesion and solidarity more negatively, and differing standards destroy deterrence. 20, for any military exit, deterrence measures operations play on law handling weapons is vital. According to NATO, members of force who possess arms and international force nations, different military regulations regarding weapons and apply national requests may differ. Various institutional, multinational, travel legal framework would change constantly. Very regulation create legal capacity to obstacles and thus a reaction to hybrid campaign of the right under NATO to possess arms will applies of force and not contractors. Contractors setting studies to employ contractors should be regulated. Moreover, contractors not governed by NATO jurisdiction should be considered. That threatens cooperation. Killstrom 11, different standards among NATO are especially communicating broader research diverging patterns to regard contractors exposed to the left unanswered different versions of potential negatively influence cohesion. Durable U.S. commitment is crucial. Handling 22, American strategies anxious to prioritize China as a challenge for U.S. defense, object to any increased research devoted to European security. Any scenarios that could involve deaths to NATO have existential implication. New crisis in Europe must be rendered to the U.S. should build places within the and making defense enduring. NATO should establish parts that could be credibly protected. Territories, the alliance's military should back up U.S. with the NATO makes to make the commitment absolutely ambiguous. So the most promising ways to deterrence robust what we know about women is the vision of greater Russia and uncertain perceptions that have effective deterrence. Any 21, defensive part of a way how to change military profile to make American presence in the Baltic states durable. Afghanistan concerns over American credibility only because sometimes the Baltic state can be our allies. Washington has America also feeling committed to the rocks on American commitment to perceptions reality glad. Having during presence of the Baltics, leading wars that have been the absence of Afghanistan, Russia has significantly increased over offensive conventional and nuclear political ground involved 200,000 Russian and Belarusian soldiers result in the permanent Russian press American possible to use and allies security indicate allies and adversaries. The integrity is crucial. Washington needs to fix the holes in NATO's deterrent posture and certainty is key. 122, the failure of NATO, especially the leader U.S. faces the crisis of credibility for both NATO and the U.S. European leaders ponder whether U.S. Article 5 commitment remains sacred. So will the U.S. really go to war for European? Now supposedly redeemed by Biden. If Putin were to get away with Ukraine, with the Baltics feel safe, they are indefensible. European allies depend on the U.S. The European doubts also stem from commitment to Afghanistan and low American priority for Europe restoring U.S. credibility is tolerable security to its member U.S. will recognize the credibility problem. And Russia has resources. Ukraine, Bear 23, while Russia's hardware is aging as possible, Russia's called 500,000 troops going to get an advanced pipeline. Obviously, Ukraine is slowing. B, motivation. COP23, Ukraine is not stop navigating people to reach out and larger conflict with the greatest freedom place. Russia will keep trying to retake territory. Sanctions military loss have not changed things logical goal. Third, recent victory strong. 23, operation by Wagner troops to take back by Russian forces are probing attack. Ukraine lines are holding. Would be missing for the West, but underestimate Russia. Play question whether Ukraine can hold back Russia's remaining winter offense of the committee where Serbia has built legal since December. Fourth, new troops. Strong 23, despite population decision to start rolling mass mobilization September means that our usable troop 150,000 troops have been training us for units. Ukraine currently on the edge of firepower. Russian protection only reason for all the warfare we heard is the Russia dry. The Russian leadership is setting out for a grinding war. While army has taken a Paul Ritchie, slowly taking around Rockwell, plus problems of support equipment, hide, product picture armament, and an army that is learning and adapting. And makes nuclear escalation likely. Also, to see Russian nuclear threat. Russia rebuilt the US nuclear weapons as if it was not the first to do so. Russia uses conventional military age by NATO has been resolved nuclear technical warfare includes operational access, urban warfare is close over Russian forces, and extinction of hardcore all 17 on nuclear war between the US and Russia. Aftermath, because the massive in the atmosphere causing your ozone loss of nuclear winter could drop global temperature to make possible only though there are extinction would be great, only possible between the US and Russia. A small war likely to lead to the future. The risk is greater from Russia, and deterrence works in Novia. And also to public assumption that we never back down is incorrect. Location trick that result in back down in 115 Turkey shut down Russian jet fiercest but escalated response is mild. Clashes took place in Libya. Direct clash between US military and Russia did not provoke escalation. There was a rhetorical response despite bluster compared to the US and actually came out of conflict with failure. A response was rooted in a face of numbers that couldn't back down. So misguided belief that at least Western is self-deterring and backing on face both Russian aggression. And it's crucial also to Russian thinking places the Russian pride is also considered survival point and statements indicate national imperialism, which kind of destructive consequence of global order. Original Russia revealed in this expansion, Russia did not have to intervene militarily. Russian PMC such as Wagner group sent to wars such as Libya, meditation, primary effort to plan Geopolitical was in Paragraph 4 and Syria, collective security treaty organization become the platform to address Russian interests, have party silent military cooperation such as the cases of China, India, and Egypt, and NATO can juggle and mitigates every risk. McKinnis 22, US reliability for further conflict question. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, role against expansion as power brains, aliens, management to address revenge Russia, array, challenge China, climate change, and technology system, revenge pandemic, migration, terrorism, and challenge from the hackle ones in the land. NATO can import moral and catalysts and solutions for complex problems. NATO so the role of values equal to overall state is remarkably resilient. Plan. The United States federal government should substantially increase its security cooperation with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in the area of cyber defense regarding private security contractors. Contention 3 insolvency. The plan solves answer. 14. NATO can lead the way part of cybersecurity considering the business suitability lines of primary contract military personnel develop a classification protocol for contracts is delineated the rules of function like release and beginning to instrument contracts to a third party peer review and oversight mechanism to ensure all contracts adhere to vertical established mechanisms and times and resources NATO should define its cost and oversight within the contract. And consensus is easy and the plan spells out Skulupa and all 20 studying how often NATO reach consensus NATO common understand habits of sharing creates foundational model which consists of flexibility to act as the alliance NATO just much but consensus skills enable separate coalition Ukraine pulse fingers and alternate alliance and host of consensus action support Ukraine. NATO is inevitable established 17 NATO has won the trade pricing over the US NATO retains 27% GDP at 20 trillion more troubling in the future and future empire tries to have military equipment no longer support reservists Russia at 2 to 20 million no obvious candidate equally UK leave EU Germany criticize France high alert alliance on collapse question short-term survivability down encourage adversaries to take aggressive actions and nuclear scenario planning is good. Filipino 17 awareness of the limits of control nuclear weapons is crucial for all video included concerns over conflict plus increased danger limit because memory is not based on fuel overconfidence focusing pathways of disaster need to be investigated research analysts to start working its overconfidence on the waiting for institutional reforms and security society is crucial to reassert that fear initiates to learn and crosses information or existential deterrence. I find physical danger kind of overconfidence is crucial. Threat scenario analysis good. Locking the juniors and teens. Scratch that. Sounds sometimes a digital version of lazy.
Let's fix all of this paper.
Also, the Michaelis card, Oxford card is not the root. When I see it, you can just scratch it. It's relevant.
The Michaelis card?
Yeah, I think part of it just got shoved in there. It says NATO can juggle. You can just scratch it.
Oh, no NATO can juggle?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's what I got in the folder.
Let me know when y'all are ready.
Okay.
Oh, this is enough.
I just got it down. Okay. You good?
Yeah.
The plan text, what does it do? What actions does it take?
Yeah, the first answer card, which is the first card on insolvency, indicates that the act would result in first consulting a third party as to whether or not we should hire PSCs or PMCs, which is like part of the plan text. The second part indicates we'd establish an oversight mechanism to ensure that the PMCs are accountable and that NATOs are held accountable for hiring them.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. The deterrence works card, Snegovaya card talks about like Turkey, etc. In 2015, Russia backed down, but then they've re-escalated in Ukraine. How does that not disprove?
Yeah,
your
very
form of
clear
deterrence?
distinction here. There was no like NATO force that resulted in a Russian reaction. The reason that Russia invaded Ukraine was because they perceived it as an opening, which means it was a lack of NATO deterrence, which is why Russia invaded Ukraine.
Okay, so deterrence, this is just saying that Russia is not, their actions are not caused by NATO. Like, where does this say that deterrence works?
The Snegovia card indicates empirically anytime someone has responded to Russian action, Putin has backed down, which shows empirically deterrence has worked.
Yes, but then re-escalated in new forms.
Yeah, but we
How
think
does-
the reason they invaded Ukraine was because NATO was not strong enough in that region, so they perceived it as a window of opportunity in order to invade.
Okay, so what does the AF do about future forms of like openings that Russia could perceive?
We read evidence which indicates that the act would signal increased commitment to NATO. We read evidence as to why that would result
How
in
does that
resurgent
commitment
concessions.
deter, or how does that like stop the perception of those
The
openings?
evidence indicates that post-Afghanistan, U.S. credibility is an all-time low because allies don't actually believe in the U.S. The act would reshift that commitment, indicate the U.S.'s U.S. is committed to NATO, which results.
Sure, I get that they're credible to NATO, but I don't understand how that is like what sends a signal to Russia, which stops.
Yeah, we read evidence which indicates the biggest problem with NATO right now is a quote crisis of credibility, which is the Hunter evidence, which means that there's a certain commitment, certain signal of commitment via the act that resolves the credibility crisis.
Okay, that makes sense. The motivation card, COP23, just asserts Russia is trying to retake territories. How do you know that this is Russia's intentions?
Sam?
Wait, the wrong card? Which card?
The COP23 card, I believe?
Oh, well, two things. One, imperialism in the past, Georgia, Crimea, now even more.
Yeah, sure, but how does that speak to their intentions with those invasions?
Yeah, the ASEM card at the Rebuttal spinach also talks about Russian intervention in places like Libya, Syria, Central Asia, etc. All things that prove their expansionist.
Yeah, you're just like listing places that they invaded. How do you know that it was for like offensive, territorial, expansion motives?
If you can win explanations of why Russia is intervening outside their sphere of influence, and for some reason that's in order to support like domestic goals and not expansionist explanation, then obviously we'll answer that. But obviously, them kind of going outside their sphere of influence militarily indicates that they're more expansionist with agenda. The COP card also excludes internal documents and also things like his education during USSR collapse.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it's like
the NATO is inevitable card. It's like highlighted like a haiku and talks about money only. Like, how does this prove a broader inevitability claim?
Disagree. It talks about how there's military equipment. We're opposed to U.S. collapse or opposed to
how does
US
that prevent collapse? I
happen.
don't see the internal link between these two
Because
things.
it means NATO still has capabilities even without the U.S. as a capability argument.
There's no internal link between those.
Okay, we'll take like 3 seconds.
10 minutes. Starting now.
These two.
Understand.
You can give me some. Okay.
9:45.
I'm sitting that right now. Actually, okay, let's pray that that is correct. Looks like. Did she write down? Can we use your paper to?
Yeah, of course. I have like extra.
You can have that.
Sorry, we're just notoriously forgetful about short time, so.
You can actually keep that 1AC forever.
That's so hard.
Here we go.
I always wanted a souvenir from the PC.
Not really is the best. I got
Paper
it.
money.
Okay, you'll only need 1 sheet of paper. Or 1 sheet and then case.
What floor are you all putting the case stuff on?
I'll mark it. I'll sign it. That's what.
I was gonna leave the edge.
Just to finish one.
Okay.
Just two.
Yeah, when I said that.
Alright. If everyone's ready, I'll begin on my first word. The international field is characterized by the governance of spatiality. This process must be seen as cartographical, whereby nation states mark the globe as mappable territories with which to congregate and interface groups and internationally consolidate stuff that want to see in both action and warfare. The production of spatial mapping for the configuration of several epistemology. The end result is primary of both social and industry practices to execute nation states monopoly of violence and move the globe from below population to 10. Social practice move away from the spatiality state towards the global setting. Towards social mobility, the nation will media the way going close. Spatial formations emerge the mobility and social flow of life is urban super territorial dimensions development, social geography, organizing speech structure, develop population, properly across organizations to fail to historicize space. This space is existing and fitting narrative that implicitly maintaining a subject object distinction to spatial reality and to take territory collective IR that is able to cartographic practices. Empirically argument is supported by the early modern period, which represents transformation of the concept of time. European powers emerged from dominant ideas of sovereignty, line, authority, understanding the national identity, contributed to developments of weak cartography, case of absolutism beginning in IR, state formulation of the representative integration of self-contained political system in the European understand identity should not be understood as national identity, but the contradiction I notion that politics is codified, but the beach should give us prevail against wars are often with control of the domain of war ways into the space inside of borders could be put into possible democratic society. Somebody should give to social bond of allegiance to define the scope of territory, social relation of allegiance, take a spatial element, just take a spatial element, and divide it as a realist territory without spatial reference, never given to territory, entails relationship between collective environment, the cartography, space of social reality, that's the claim to monopoly, legitimate violence, without a certain territory, invariably, the form of system process taking place on a move surface, which is both controlled politics, dominating politics, boundaries, social crucial figure of a transition with a traditional modern shape, which is mobilized means of violence, and oculus intuited through internal consolidation, two dimensions of control mapping, and description patterns, and principles of what is mapped and how in the spaces of other agency who draws them in, and transition facilitate a new way of controlling characteristics, power, and there also the possibilities of political organization, abstraction, erase images of homogeneous spaces with the boundaries of support everyday political services, actually going to be planned in their own spaces, that spatial big knowledge is a matter of agency, which point is integrated system of knowledge without which condition and makes social action, and therefore because of the balance of power combined with the internalization of technology shapes the ontology of the world and the force of territorial sovereignty on the subject, the idea that nations that existed in anarchy and distortion of the international that legitimizes the territorial expansion and warfare makes structurally inevitable spatial territory frames of the African planet and air on the question of links transported the territory's dimension of social life and being implicated by the ways of thinking and being informed by the conditional ways of knowing the territory's social order and person of the territory in turn informed collective and individual entities practices of making as opposed to particular work view of what a particular language and sovereignty and territory countries and monarchies, territory abuse and spatial material, spatial and visual, establishing links between policy people and the natural link from the personal sovereignty to the control exercise with the effective jurisdiction lies in the spatial decision state sovereignty, the specific conceptualization of the international foundation for modern era, problem with the areas of rest of the fact of the discuss territory and spatial issue overlooking the condition of territorialization of the sovereignty state as anarchy, safety, as spiritual and dynamic powers, territory cannot be stated to define an area space for all times, it cannot be Canadian in the rigid limits of the legitimizing territorial expansion of weapon image, positive existence of struggling space, which resident the contradiction out of this struggle for space is born in a short life struggles within increasing uncertainty to the control of the Eurasian harmony, which is key to command of the border the age of chaos and under the global cleans global politics, but there was more than open space level all true action from the world from a shuffle of research issues in how technology manipulates spatial conditions the balance of ability to integrate Eurasia contained by this change within the alien technology increased by power the relationship changing space define the material characterization of policy that no longer space was no longer a natural condition doesn't mean that a conflict of territory would occur in international system based on spatial organization and military power that over the opportunity to find states in the manner of systematic conversion area and collective space there is no different of sovereignty over what is limits. And in cybersecurity is a self-justified loop of threat protection that serves to augment the war machine. This turns case because cyber war is inevitable. Tucker 17, cyber war shift from virtual means to the complicated warfare. It seems to go down to cooperate with the notion of attack that makes it amorphous. Armed with the question makes it a part of it, not a weapon, and expresses the materialization through a material efforts coming to adversaries subversives the paradigm of cyber war. And this war integration to a total war machine that would be another way to the cyber war parallels the cyber wars continue in this composite omnipresent weapons that is the driving force for total war machine. The digital has been an important component of the war machine's ability to connect computers expanding into the American military. The cyber war moves military action is filling around Facebook. There'll be similar place the military control. The cyber war balance the film and the political thrill of the generates ominous agent coding as leads to the war department of substance experience as somebody and then face worse than death. When I see the conclusion is a collusion with tech mastery of the homogenized difference into a monocultural framing, reposition them as a bank of geopolitics, but reproduces genocide. But these changes are certain, but these changes unlikely apocalypse and marine homogenization is fundamental because of the loss of different features dominated by those who seek mastery. The mechanisms to take a conflict are reproducible, legendary, utilitarian conceptions of the extract, so scarcity and their ability to flourish under extract the economy making. That means that one wins the aids the crisis of homogenization, such as localized right of human and non-human life, and unhingeable laws of modern copy the pushback to the front of Eurasia, the flattening life. We should be careful of the world is set free by Western technology, the pushback for less managerial ethos, experimentation, the risk of human progress, hyperfunctionalism carries a danger to the re-emperor, the geopolitical vanguard. There are worse things than death and survival as status causes no alternative but another reality, the inability to break from the reality of subordinating the system of the world, develop realist pessimism and that resist the nihilism and the moralized optimism. We should they survive at the cost of other forms of life. And there look at the option of policy reinvestment control over time. The only model of applied Newtonian frame causes the effect of the attempt to homogenize space, resulting in yours shaping of the debate at the level of form. But they attempt to signify one meaning will inevitably fail due to fluctuation in space and time transportation. Monopolitics spatial relying on distinction between in and outside of the space of the parameters and international policies, sovereignty, specified politics that can name in the new range of possibilities in time. And we represent inside and outside of the distinction between spatial division. We represent that it ought to be important. Spatial proximity rests on the nation, new coding concept of time, which is to expensive power. The worst hesitated ability policy in the world is absolute space of Newtonian relative to describe Euclidean geometry, which is how much infinity to space, how much infinity and turning the culture of European civilization to hope that temporarily may be tamed backwards in the hope of the future. Think about entities of the opportunity, policy and ambivalence, distinction between absolute space and modernity, the territory, opportunity, some sovereignty signifies all kinds of meaning. Spatial strategy with fixing any meaning, rejecting untenable fluctuating world arguments are articulated and after that is blurred with the emptiness meaning. And all of the world system, the nations are determinately unsustainable. We must ontologically reconstruct what it means to be by democracy or by becoming citizens of and for the world. Archbishop 2, the position has been regulated, carrying out at a stated level impossible to be constructed to read democracy over the last 3 decades. The population has been double taken, making it possible to create connection to the existing organization fail. The cosmic democracy to be created, institutional representative fail for all the world reasons. President disparities exist in research companies and different state interactions go on and decision taken up by the oligarchs to spring to the higher secrecy of the national levels of exchange operate within control. Digits inherent with the heads are found in the U.S. NATO to provide instruments cosmic counter imposing a global democratic control rather than existing states democratic global institution by the states have a pretext for misuse of power. External threat in the world over found on the legal agenda between the world of favored forces of political choice. Sovereignty allow for dedicated use of the 200 million killed and the 2/3 victims of internal states humanitarian intervention have been income with future nature proved to be catastrophic. NATO is designed to minimize its own loss and disregard their own sovereignty. No interference, no solution to decide on sovereignty were replaced by global constitutionalism demonstration to wake the spirit of opposition. We need democratic management of the global events on high-tech or possible realpolitics. After use of realpolitics, a new conflict of the U.S. has proven incapable of preventing. And on case, skip the first card. On the second event, there are framing of Russia as Cold War duality logic that frames Russia as never attacking anything other in relation to the U.S. They descriptively legitimize the unending militarism of joining the conflict between capitalism, communism, overarching narrative of Soviet story, and ideology quality, the form of powerful national security, and to be led to anxiety of the several two countries that protagonists and antagonists most interested not as truthfulness, but short-lived expected script for us will explain the threat was more accurate than the Nazi that Soviet Union portrayed the holding neurotic view of the world's affairs, suffering, of insecurity, the economy between democracy and dictatorship played under the Soviet, they contrasted with the Americans. So, Iron Curtain speech marketed into opposing political entities, proven to the Soviet threat, effect exemplified the Vietnam War, cause of disregard the diversity of Asia, framed the ideological, politically antagonistic, other portrayed the urgent military measures result was an upsurge of defense, ending atomic weapon transformation into defense, demilitarization, expanding. And on the first event, international law is founded on a distinction between civilized and uncivilized that employs a colonializing logic, the combination of the slides. 2008 international laws found creating conceptual structure which entrenched and exclude undermining alternative ways of looking at the world. International law attempts to obscure the colonial origin and is going to show within the equality quotation which is inherent in the colonial counter.
What was the last word you said? Sorry.
Colonial counter.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start on case the Yon and Fu evidence written before the Ukraine invasion. Why did Russia invade Ukraine?
Yeah. So the K directly indicts we can agree with your theory of sort of like a revisionist frame, but it's rather how we respond to that because.
Yeah.
That can
if Russia is revisionist, what is the appropriate response in the world for the alternative?
Well, it's a question of democracy itself. We think Delancey has forwarded a form of kind of planning and lapses back into the idea of deterrence politics, which the second card kind of impact turns that conception. In response to your first question, it does not matter whether or not Russia is revisionist or does not, because the Yuan and Fu card talks about how the ideological, the truth claims that were made in the forms of Cold War duality logic did not matter, insofar as it still legitimized forms of violence that then ramped up
Not exactly
tension.
responsive. Understand you don't think deterrence is correct. I'm just confused what the alternative does instead of
Well,
deterrence.
no, it's not that we don't think deterrence is correct. We think actually the opposite, that deterrence is an inevitable act. We think that the ebb and flow of deterrence will always happen insofar as you cannot solve for all deterrence, which is proven by cross-ex.
Okay,
there will
so
only be new forms of warfare that re-emerge
deterrence
as
inevitable results
challenges.
in more. What does the alt do to stop deterrence?
Yes, the alternative is a kind of global systems. We think that forms of cosmopolitan democracy are able to effectively check the motives and remove the pretext for these actors to go to war.
Who is involved in the
first place.
cosmopolitan democracy?
It's a global system.
Global system? Do you fiat it?
I don't know what fiat is.
Do you politically, hypothetically imagine that this new system order is
Yeah, we
successful?
think the imagination is good, but when you read utopian fiat in the 2AC, it won't really be offense.
Why? Why is it not fiated?
Because all of our offense is about how just simply injecting the scholarship into the forms of academia, like debate. Archibugi says that this is the catalyst that is necessary
So, to clarify,
kind of
alt
form those
solvency
movements.
is not fiated. It's a question of this debate. What do judges voting negative do to for the alternative?
Yeah, it's a question of injecting scholarship, like I said. Archibugi says that the injection of scholarship is a kind of catalyst for the ways that forms of
One
movements...
NC already
because
read,
movements,
already
movements
injected
already
scholarship.
exist.
Why do you need the ballot?
Sorry?
One
Yeah,
NC
the
already
balance key
read.
to sort of endorse our frame of analysis. Otherwise, your analysis, which we've proven is harmful, goes forward.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
also it precludes the forms.
to clarify, alt solvency, you need a win that all three judges voting negative results in this K being
It's
read
not
again.
alt solvency, it's an
No.
endorsement of our strategy.
Yeah.
I'm confused. Those two seem like the same thing. You said your strategy is the alternative.
We
Why does-
can prove that our strategy.
There are multiple neg-win conditions besides the alternative.
Yeah.
What are the other ones?
Yeah, we're going to make framework arguments about why the
Okay.
kind of forms of
Tucker evidence, cyber war inevitable. Why?
Sorry?
Tucker evidence says cyber war is inevitable. Why?
Yeah, the Tucker evidence cites that there will always be a form of threat on the horizon. This is proven by all of your arguments on the first advantage about like privateers.
Why does the app result in this violence?
Yeah, because there's always a form of securitization that needs to happen in order to resolve things.
Yep.
Your Egloff card, I think, talks about how those forms are inevitable and we can't attribute those.
Okay, the two things. I gotta pee. I'm gonna drink my water bottle then. Cool. It's
I'm gonna pee.
alright, I'll sleep too.
Yes.
Actually, I just need to double check something. I'm gonna take a second apart. 2 minutes.
Walden radio was fire.
No.
Didn't think you did. You know, gotta be safe.
Okay, stop at 9:46.
Alright, so.
Thank you so much. So the one NBC said put the case defense on advantage 2, so I put it on advantage 2, which I know is not what we said earlier, but it's on advantage 2.
Okay.
And the order is advantage 1, advantage 2, then the cat. Has everyone gotten it? Is anyone not ready? Six. Increasing cyber attacks making improvements calc inevitable due to lack of classification for private military contractors and cosmic perception distinction. A continued advantage outweighs disadvantage. NATO deterrence is faltering innovations over PMCs, used in commitment and crucial winning Russia escalation. T1 and T1 were right. Russia is aggressive, continuing cross-sex, Libya, Syria, Egypt, Egypt improve their expanding units, stop the NATO's good, and keep to deter above deterrence is key to alternate escalations. Also, we don't need to solve for all deterrence, we need to solve the deterrence that will be the advantage in our terms. They have not contested the alternative. If it does solve, it's united in case, but it does not. Still, our solve, we're going to our theory arguments, which is below. T1 and T2 marked way to order the 0 words is impact turn on the K by NATO deemed good. Okay. Framework where the one I see against a competitive alternative that can result be activated around the planet because the only will cease point the bottom collapses, fairness and class precisely the birth of a majority both that way are independent impacts. The alternative can't solve the app, the rejects security.
Cooperation features on NATO B is about solvency, single about can't resolve in party structures, don't resolve interpersonal lines, only model debate, encourages larger critical thinking on both sides, access and logic and link. C picks our voting issue, makes the name of a target. Since they run to screw the alternative feels the actual we never generate offense, experience in class. D private mindset and national piano are voting issues with the goals of an automatic perspective, justifies the world peace, is unfaithful, turns clash and piano, their survival epistemology thinks is wrong. Ready 15. Choice and not generic time for decision making matters, scholarship, proof, results, more ability, active visibility, more breaking outcomes, work, solutions, turn to their statement, operations, and importance of rigorous research, psychology, technique, economic policy, critically necessary, boundaries, for bad public policy, change, legal methods, improve, causal fears, improve self-care, causal fears, and worry, finance, market, financial, government, burning, left, or line, district, vaccination, change, work, outside, college, technical, policy, be, right, there's something about direct, and I'm trying to recognition, accuracy, submission, review, contribution, debate, error, future, can be, are we out of the effects effectively, K, can't distribute, impact, 9. The notion theory of marquis and creativity that what is specifically to therapeutic is convincing that why the national view of body activity and treatment of thoughts and possibility of becoming close to the mission behavior to the people last week's review defense decision makers trained on some based on the most accurate intelligent that make them mentioned aware of thoughts from their control to take after people prior to presenting to analysis is something important writing on them make sure we're taking all the percentage viewers and career information but the cosmopolitan fair fails for 20. Nationalism has been powerful because in this revaluation of the nation state, which cannot be overcome with the cosmopolitan paradigm. Nationalism, no healthier sense of society and politics can be correlated with the national borders. We unify common things, so cosmopolitan or not service based on communities necessary to address the world. Permutation, do both, even simultaneously engage in cosmopolitanism and the alternative, and even if you agree with their impact, will simultaneously say that we should substantially increase cyber defense with private security contractors. If it's true, then they all care that we can definitely overcome the app. If it can't, if it can easily just as overcome the links to the plan. If it does not, there's no cognitive solvency. For the vast majority of the links now, no link borders are never rogue bitches, Russia will violate the far worse about Ukraine and Taiwan, which proves there's only ways to strong LASA CH and issue solve their impact. Their first try to start. Transferring no link to complexity. A, their authors call for a thorough research process that considers multiple variables as the process of drafting the one and the process of debate. If it's not, it results in inaction, which turns all their offense. B, our cyber transfer from reducing false readings from central information. Only the plans also true instances of data complexity that results in nuclear terror. That's clear. And sorry, now complexity does not legitimize prediction. Down just for 1. Easy to further possibilities something about ideas for the more complex economy there and do ideas of whole nation do the program of proliferation of nuclear given power for safety 18 million lives so 2040 climate different that way from our rate to make climate change to approach predictions are good scored 322. Difficulties not argument for predictions of things may be under people who can learn if you try to establish why people are usefully examining what may be predictable what is not regular patterns or related conditions issues helpful for the analysis of public management the prediction of problems of black spots cannot be predicated by thoughts can be predicted the books are more useful for more out of the works well in one table lesson we may learn something about prediction less we do better regards against every context about power evidence no link A to the context of its link of mission says we fail to describe our spatial permutation of these solves we know IR we don't defend a broad theory about reducing the specific condition specific theories in church should be stopped there presumption about otherwise they have to disprove our internal links on the active rate. I theory outweighs. Now, liberalism is good, use military methods is non-coercive. Circuit 19. Hegemony rates poorly, understood course of public norms, people in case war first, and use peacefully basic policy works, and heat and set the light studies on Vietnam, case, no arctic countries, and religion to give to Belgium, Korea, Turkey, Kuwait, the US, where the empire is will debate on the ethnic culture, university, two X characters of empire, no meaning in the world, where the order 16 different perspectives of the nation take the new actor to our choice to advise us where the US war, human rights, technical effects, use the term imperial, new isolation of the term as well, the US role in Korea fails the imperial test as role in Germany, Japan, these countries, with 3/4 of the US foreign policy, not to mention Spain, Turkey, Taiwan, and Kuwait, all learned to align for the criticism to hold the evident domination should be easy to make some countries talk about our troops as several economics and how the critique false countries to host the troops of the fastest centuries. Extreme classic crime mortality, increased longevity, growth and infrastructure, good improvements in HDI, records gained and unequivocally beneficial for substance or gender mentality of bombings in our case cities and the underlying themes between two improving prosperity, the ironic this goal unfolds American journeys benefit the world to foster peace and unprecedented prosperity. The question is not whether use is a force for good it is. The question is can power be sustained? The next link argument is about nation states being bad, it's good, sustainable, and 11. Trade profits and business workers for cosmopolitan as consistent with persistence of the nation states, everything will go market there is balkanized world economy organized around Europe, North America, East Asia, emerging economies, like the regional remains connected to the nation states. Now you need to think about our free flow capital to labor, which is people special and most multinational half global, even globalized group of people for advertising global links or international governments surveil us. The advocate of the economic nationalism never ended. First 1945 back capitalist nation of subsidy, non-term barriers and currency state. Don't credit the produced domestic market, this or currency control of emissions driven by market exporting rates marked at immigrants. The cyber link, A, the threat is real, Russia's expansion will attack, Uruguay exercises bigger 22, criminal syndicates, significant cyber that use steal later, extort money, whether chasing to steal the Russian intelligence, chasing by solo wins Ukraine, cyber protection, theater, conflict, Russian military, acknowledging electronic warfare, increasing numbers of targets, need of your law enforcement, interfering in communication that has been important. Near-death, not enable the act either solves or there's a don't escalate, as we want to see. Clear evidence, B, cyber war is real, stereotype 16. Ontology of war and cyber war applies to classicity and principles and actual wars and ultimately fatal argue cyber war does not encompass concepts cyber wars dominated Russia, which cyber war, custodian, Georgia, cyber war, cyber safe capabilities, all except cyber war, classified little common cyber war, could protect the lonely essay cyber cases, could go military operation, Washington, make declarations, cyber war, fighting, enemy, cyber current, cyber demanding, cyber virtual world, this new cyber consequence, serious, to John, the fact that concepts of mesh wars, constitutions, fear for human behavior, the full section of politics, cyber still used for anything other to environment to work and conduct lawsuits, classification of abilities to watch special computer code, can be weaponized, air costs behind us, so there's sufficient evidence, actually, blows with harmful effects, studies, so related to University, CNS, National Cyber Tech Sector, source code could be used for destructive purposes of war and not be approved to be destructive nuclear war to be just in simple regard that whether or not we apply to make class with server taking place to make others of real for not to be of little these scholars need to be focused on understanding form warfare so I can for rejecting will ensure in the future see that through misdiagnosis the cause of shifty warfare, couple 12. Argument is an information that's significant as a thing. These inherently new concepts are conceived within inherent social war, kings, spiritual, Marcus, and revolution, social relation, non-technological needs, sort of play real wars with thousands, died, new wars arise, and countries release origin, state capacity, safety, force, will, unilateral against other states every greatly weaken the growing destructiveness, military technology, increasing interconnectedness, and violence is often like military cooperation created. Global military integration, the growth, such like mastery stuff. A, there's no impact worse than death because it forecloses improvement. To try or die for survival because the alternative is internalizing it. Since we should all die, which is the extinction always stuff I did above, it's the only different framework you must come first. The app is the only way that solves it because they have not extinction impacts of the 2 C. It's also irreversible, which outweighs, which I just did. 2, universal truth, second controls, key solve violence, or North Korea, 18. New and political policies and reorganization exists with conflict interest based sources because of the information religious setting developed. The last Washington consists of government intelligence, organization, corporate news media, and GS needs to invite early warning about disaster relief, like credit, war, interior, atrocity, like criminal weapons attacks, and politics, displaced arbitraries with the racial networks, this is scheduled new politics, aspect control, and alternative control, so the scene acting, independent, active new politics, non candidates, or exclusionary by nature. 3, growth is sustainable versus 23. Rate of cocoa population with the consistent ITF, if you doubled the Olympic estimates, only 14% of people live in less than the mean would be austerity formula leadership with Thatcher society, less rules, regulations, cabinet mission, actually fell from 1990 to 2015 years, crop donation increase, precision, ag, increase in inputs, decline, digitization, goods, services, and aluminum cans, lighter, building, interior, flexible use system, consuming less metals, equaling 33 countries, goals over energy, copper, aluminum reserves, 25 what they were, largest carbon consistency was Francis Water, country, political, yet continued the, and treating nation state unitaries and necessary for solid theorizations of IR, 7. Scholars work from assumption by providing explanation theories, assume theories, primary actions, theories, don't deny existence of others, and important and not saying actions, and obviously powers of species, important that theories must take them at its core statements as national interest, and other assumption of being my probable state possess final authority, reasonable justice, treat states as unitary, systems defined by policy make states unique and IRA, all in India, can only come to speak for it because with unique states are more important actors, thus units of analysis in international politics. Anyways, it's really important balance. U.S. has been the cause of anti-imperialism globally. Act 1915. U.S. law, Western Empire, the force of imperialism upon the global system. The waves of empire building more quickly. U.S. played anti-imperial and technical roles. U.S. rebel against imperial roles, supporting independence against European efforts to colonize and substitute by pursuing all this authority, imperial product, independent Italy, also building institution moderating anarchy, ability to survive independent restraining war, aggression, globally tied, anti-colonial, imperial, against empire, collateral, cooperation enables smaller states to sustain sovereign alliance, expecting system for violence, conflict, and empire building. That should have been already in the doc, right?
It was.
It was?
Yeah, that was the library card.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have seen that.
I think it's
already in
the
the
doc.
What is it under?
I'll just resend it with at the bottom, just in case, but I thought yeah.
Oh, well,
yeah,
no, I
that's
found it.
also
It's
into
the second card under it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You're gonna cross.
Yeah.
Okay. Theoretical reasons for drinking.
Private mindset, fiat, international fiat, X.
Okay. On framework, what are your impacts to sort of reading the plan?
We think we get the app, it's the only predictable stasis point as per fairness and clash.
What are the external benefits to those?
Well, 2 things. 1, we think clash makes us better arguers, persuaders, researchers, teaches skills, and regardless of what we do when we leave the activity.
Sure, what are those skills?
Well, we think research and argumentation skills.
Is it research and argumentation broadly, or just one skill?
I don't really understand the distinction.
I'm just saying, like, if you're doing it broadly, couldn't someone become better researching at, like, bad things?
Well, 2 things. 1, we think clash leads to things like truth testing, whereas you do a ton of research and you're able to come to your own conclusions based off if you have these bad takes that are probably factually incorrect and are probably racist to some level. You do more research and arguments, and eventually you come to the correct conclusion.
Well, I mean,
but
there are
predictable debates are key to test that because only through those can you break down bias as a dogma.
I mean, sure, but there are also tons of debaters who became, like, advocates of terrible people, terrible things. How does clash sort of prevent that?
Well, I don't know why that's the burden of clash. We think those skills are regardless good. Second, the internal aspect of fairness is that it's the basis for all competitive equity. We've all agreed to some notions of fairness. The fact that we all agree to speech times. We're doing a process right now. We flip the coin, etc. The fact that you don't want to make this debate a coin flip probably means that fairness is the only structural condition in that ways.
Sure. What's like, okay, so can you explain like why our epistemology is like servile in this way?
The very top. The first one. The writer evidence is really good. It's in the context of how debates about IR, even if our IR conceptions are wrong, are still good because of similar things about clash and impacted above. IR is research, it's complex, and we do debates over them to come to conclusions. Those debates are inherently good and teach us valuable skills, especially in the context of IR scholarship when we're able to break down things of existing biases.
Yeah, sure. I guess that's what leads me to that sort of next argument against like sort of your complexity does not legitimize stuff. You talked about how like your evidence takes into account sort of the complexities. How does that like respond to?
Well, your evidence is in the context of how the like international system is way too complex, so we can't get the opposite. You don't know what effects it might have.
Sure.
But all of our research and all of our Irish scholars and the one I see indicate the opposite good idea. They have done the research. Second, we think this leads to inaction because we're not drawing bright line for when we actually have enough information to actually act. So voting negatives, like
but that's I think that's
that's
kind of the point. Is like, how does your research like specifically like enable sort of fighting back against all the other opposite research that may exist?
You haven't read any opposite impact research.
Yeah, but that's
you
kind of
conceded the app. It's true.
All right, sure. Sure.
But this proves the point that debates about
that's fine. Your Calder card near the bottom.
Yeah.
It's sort of in the context of Baudrillard. Why is it responsive?
Two things. One, the 2AC, 2NC could stand up and explain this. Starving this card is an idea like we're all coding from reality. We need to break out the cyber war isn't real at all. That in fact turns out it's not true. The cyber war is real anyway.
Okay, sure.
Okay. 9:45, I think.
Yep.
Starting now.
so disappointed.
Okay. That card is signed. It's the K.
We're still waiting on it.
Yeah, I'll just. There's some stuff about the order of the K, so I'll just wait until. Actually, 6 times. Okay. 5:45.
You say 5:45?
Yeah.
Should we grab Julian or just?
What's up?
Should we grab Julian or?
Oh, is he just like
I think he
talking
might be
outside?
socializing.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I'll get that.
SMH.
Thank you. I
Bro.
just got like 6 minutes.
Like
I had,
before
like-
the round, they were like, "Where are you? You're not here."
I had,
And I was
like,
like,
8
"I'm right here."
I had 8 texts. Like, please chill out. You're good. It's the K. It's gonna be mostly straight down except for the extinction stuff, and the alternative. Extinction, alternative, yeah, and then, but otherwise straight down.
Wait, sorry, give me 1 second. I have to lose my email.
Okay,
Okay, okay.
cool. Good? Sweet.
Modern warfare and international relations must be analyzed cartographically. Nation states and empires mark the globe into territories that must be shifted every so often to maximize imperial gain. States accumulate that imperial power vis-a-vis territorial violence and attempts to shift the balance of power in the favor of the self. Think of colonial powers remapping colonized territories in the scramble for Africa, demarcating the boundaries of whose place get to decide who got what in the name of imperial power. These shifts are inevitable in a cartographic world which takes out the internal unions for their impacts. There's a conceded claim from the 2AC which also ensures zero policy failure since their impacts will always manifest in other forms of deterrence, which is proven by all the arguments that we made in crossings about how Russia will always form new reasons to take over new forms of power. Organizations like NATO congregate to better spatialize the world into distinct categories and enact violence on those who are outside the group, and pedagogy replicates that violence. It's empirically proven. Think of proxy wars between NATO and countries behind the Iron Curtain that started proxy wars across the world where the line between each team was demarcated along ideological lines. Thus, spatialization extends debates ideological lines and becomes replicated through the mapping of policy, which itself is chosen along lines that enforce racialized violence onto the other who could never fit in the dream of Western power. The one-way and two-way will hinge on proximity. This is a ruse. To LASA wants to tell you that the world works in a specific way in the specific scenario and trust us. It'll all be fixed. This is a Western form of spatiality that we've already critiqued and impact her, and that assumes that space should be organized by those in power because they're rational, responsible actors. Also double turns any explanations that they make about realisms or revisionisms. They say that certain it also double turns all their predictions stuff because it says that ways in a certain people act in certain ways in certain contexts. If anything, it's a neg argument because it proves that attempting to predict and order the world is inherently difficult since international relations are fraught with contradiction among billions of actors. Now, framing debate must defend their complicity in systems of cartography for weighing the material consequences of the plan. The one he sees a planning project is imbricated in logic spatialization by effectively dividing the globe before they get the outreach to first weigh the intrinsic costs and benefits of their engagement in systems of power by asking them why they were complicit. And one he sees forward a worldview imbricated in applies to cartography. That worldview is violent and deserves rejecting because it brings dividing conquer strategies to debate. Interrogating the systems of power comes first. Debate has no external impact on it except the effects on our subjectivity and unconscious orient those towards non-violence. The role of the ballot is to de-spatialize the one by reframing the debate towards a relational model instead of a bordered one. Utilize the cognitive dissonance that losing the map allows to break outside the dominant forms of planning that have already infiltrated the social debate. It's key. Frame the ballot is the primary sign of the larger assemblage of signs inside the map of debate. Voting night disrupts the ways that mapping operates and acts as a counter-mapping against a calcified model of debate that's best will impact on the framework. Each does as an independent link because it means the form of the one you see can only be useful insofar as it reinforces spatialization. When a spatial imaginary idea is an impact on their form of scenario planning is divide and conquer strategy to enforce the spatialization. The global and mappable territories more effectively create flows of power. They are the planners who took part in the dividing of native lands in colonial America who carefully craft the skills to defend colonial race. The very idea of scenario planning assumes the agency to decide what goes on in foreign lands and justifies intervention for the sake of protecting our interests. That spills out to fascism. Their skills are not isolated from the model of debate. Training students create about policy based on morally bankrupt ideology, independently causes academic irresponsibility. It flips all their clash offense. Our model forces them to defend their scholarship. Otherwise, they become bad researchers to defend and cults without understanding why, which link turns them. Second is demarcation. DA fiat mirrors the cartographic spatialization and trains debaters to demarcate along the lines, and anyone who outside it is defined antagonistically in relation to the dominant power system and colonial power brackets of the scholarship and debaters who challenge dominant narratives of imperialism that manifest in racialized scapegoating violence evidence through striking up like panels and NDDC to split the TK and policy and calling the concept like debaters who playing the music when debaters don't conform to cartographic planning power. Their use of the model is not neutral or other crucial for them economies that make debaters more actively more violent. Now, fairness and clash, you can group them. One is predictability. Borders K's are on every topic, especially on international topic. One's an open F literally is research for you. Second is half side. You got infinite prep speed first and last. You choose the topic which corrects any ground loss. Third is all cause speed. The experiments spamming T-shells, big teams cutting new test sets every terminal all the way. Prove that fairness is not the primary motivation of the game. For the self-correcting two is always adaptive. They lose research and cutting the multiple cards up. B the K making ground loss temporary at worse. Improving epistemology outweighs. 5 is that choice. You gotta choose what goes in the half inch of the cards to defend it as well as the justifications for them. They should be able to defend the impactors. The core parts of the app like deterrence. Now the skills offense you can group all of it. If they go for it and the 1AR will already impact her. Those skills argument is not whether the skills are created or not, but if those skills are good in the first place, that very concept of allowing more skills fails because they only serve to reproduce imperialism. The skills are co-opted and used to strengthen the institutions that we're critiquing. The only way that they can prove they're good is impact turning cartography or proving their clash is value neutral, which both are impossible. Now the valid shape subjectivity stuff I'll do here. Debate is unique. It cannot resolve the conversations and other stuff like things like family, friends, etc. Do not talk about cartography in the first place. We've already linked turned to interpersonal thinking stuff because they remain trapped within echo chambers and servile epistemology. Bad stuff. It's not a question of reflexivity only insofar as it lapses back into spatialized tactics. The best way to respond to things in the first place. Now the security logic wrong card. This is the Rebuttal card. They've conceded the Strasbourg card of framing shapes, reality, spatialization, practices, empirically grounded on framing. Things like the earliest shift to the early modern age proves that the forms of culture that are imbricated in Eurocentric ideology are necessarily
bad and true.
The perms, I'll do them here. One is remapping data. The perms attempt to resituate the alpha along new lines and better veil the violence that occurs along the lines demarcated by the half two links. Third is sets of the perm. Third is framework winning. It means that the assumptions of the alpha bound rejected for is mutually exclusive. The case and the impact on their form of planning. Now the double bind is nonsensical in the context of framework, but they've conceded the cross-ex flagging about how the injecting academic stuff is into the movements is key to catalyzing all of our offense. It disproves their stuff. Now the complexity stuff I won't do it here, but in the link debate I'll do it now. One is deterrence. We've already impacted on the concept of it insofar as it's an attempt to reshape the ontology of the world to increase colonial control. Deterrence is concepts that are primarily based on the idea of increase in hardened spatialization practice that allow the global flows of capital to go unabated. The two era will say Russia is bad and imperialists will explicitly preempt that idea. We also agree that they might be bad, but they've missed that those countries in the West are simply two sides of the same coin. The idea of keeping control away from that intrinsically implies implies an increase in control for the West to operationalize or remark Western territory on the lines of the modern state. This is a type of imperialism that flattens the globes as the colonial forces work with the East. It's obviously them. Crossing is unable to prove any warrants for motive for why Putin wants warfare, simply citing interventions and proxy wars is not an actual warrant. We're winning controlling ontological claim about the way that Russia acts means that they simply lapse back into the politics of old. The impact of sovereign violence, that becomes the next step in the biopolitical socialization of the globe into Western models. It turns the case they've missed the deterrence is untamable as an ebb and flow. They're shoring up the deterrence will only be reversed by other countries in violent fashion in an attempt to re-establish space along the lines of non-Western interests. Our enemies will always inevitably find more drastic methods of picking a fight with the West Coast, which exponentially boost the risk of violence. Now, the second is cybersecurity. The idea of it becomes a legitimizing narrative that justifies military action. Cyber is inevitably amorphous, has no set definition in what it means within the 1AC, which means that it could be in reality much smaller than they're making it out to be. It becomes the motive by which we militate via the war machine against external threats in the international sphere. It's clearly them. 1AC clause says that attributing cyber attacks will be hard. We agree, but that flows negative because the inability to know who we fight becomes the justification for increased militarism. Even the attacks themselves don't solve cyber attacks. It still forms motives to respond in escalatory ways. Sparks a tit for tat internal. The impact is nuclear warfare. There will always be another known enemy on the horizon to fight, which creates a self-justifying loop of new forms of military. It paradoxically creates new forms of cyber insecurity response, defensive measures like the threat and balance power and ramp up capabilities. Now the permutation does not solve. It's a question of the inevitability stuff, which is the answer to the balance of power stuff. Now the hegemony stuff. Nation states are terminally unsustainable. Financial crisis, terrorism, pandemics, and climate change are all problems that cross borders. Domestic nation states are outdated and able to adapt, but there's no link. It's a question of root cause. All of our offense predicated on the idea that their use of hedge causes violence in the first place, not hegemony broadly. Now the nation states good argument. Now we're winning or controlling root cause of warfare. They conceded our spatialization thesis about how it's caused inevitable wars, which always causes more violence. Now the threat real stuff, it does not matter, or so legitimizing forms of conflict, which the conceded war attackers says that they create justification in other forms, just framing and cross-ex about how they're, even if they're right, it still creates new forms of warfare. Now the cyber war is real. We agree. It's just a question of response to cut down above. Misdiagnosis stuff is this card about poetry or not. Our thesis, which we've already not about information, but the threat construction no link. We are not making coding arguments. You are not debating Dardarian. Now the util stuff, and we've already impact turned the idea of util as demarcating along the lines of colonial empires, etc. The already get done impact turned above, which but also the 1NR will do more on that. Now the treating nation states argument, we've already impact turned the state analysis, recreates forms of analysis that lead to deterrence, false analyzing from the lens of togetherness is good, which will be the 1NR, and the Eichenberry thing, that'll just be the 1NR.
Any other cross-ex?
Yeah, good.
Framework, what does defending our holistic cartography mean?
Yeah, so it's a question of defending your investments in the forms of cartographic practices. We think that that is kind of a prerequisite to any ethical engagement.
Do we get to weigh the app?
Sorry?
Do we get to weigh the app?
No.
Why?
Because we
Plan
think
our
that
impacts are obviously a defense of our cartography. Why do you exclude
we've already impact turned those justifications. It's
so
not
why don't
simply
we get
it's
to
not
weigh our plan and impacts against
well,
the
I mean your
justifications?
defense we've already impact turned your justifications.
Yes,
Our-
I understand you've impact turned justifications. Our justifications are obviously our impacts. Why don't we get to weigh those against your impacts?
Yes, because it's a question of material versus epistemological. Even if you're completely
Explain
right.
that to me. What's the distinction?
Yeah, even if you're completely right about all of the impacts out there, we've made epistemological impact turns to the
Right,
kind of
but our
framing of
impacts
the 1AC,
justify our
which produces
epistemology as
poor
being correct,
epistemology.
so why do you exclude that?
Because they still produce poor epistemology. Obviously,
Why
you cannot
incorrect
solve.
do we produce poor epistemology?
Yeah, you cannot solve any of the impacts
That's
of the
not
1AC,
the
which means
question.
it's only a
That's
question
not the
of
question.
if your
Why,
epistemology
if
is
we're
bad.
correct, do we produce bad epistemology?
Because it's a okay. This goes back to the framing issue that he made in cross-ex. One, even if your truth values are still correct, it still legitimizes forms of imperialism,
Right,
which
but
we've
our
already
true
impact
values
turned.
justify that. But
Sorry?
I'll move on. I want to talk about
Imperialism is good under no circumstances.
I want to talk about the second thing you said in the context of like you can't solve the app, we can solve the K. What does voting negative do to solve the K?
Yeah, so the alternative will be in the 1NR, but basically we think that the forms of like deterrence that you have isolated are necessarily inevitable, and those conflicts are inevitable. We think that it's a question of the alternative.
Yeah,
And
this-
forms of world systems,
So
i.e.
you have,
injecting.
you have to go for the alternative to win.
No,
Why?
because we have independent neg win conditions on framework.
Let's talk about that framework win condition. Your subject for justification was that we don't talk about cartographies with friends. Why is that a reason to debate subjectivity?
Well, it's about how debate is the controlling internal link to those subjectivities,
Why?
but we've also made
What
arguments
makes
about
debate
how.
key?
Yeah, because cartographic practices are unique in the forms of planning that the 1AC has
Where do you think any of
diagnosed.
these
But
cards
there's
are about debate?
sorry.
What do you think any of these cards are about debate?
I mean, we've applied them to debate.
Oh, so
Obviously,
it sounds
it's
like
not.
outside research is more impactful than debate.
Well, I mean, do you talk about cartography with your
That's
friends?
not a reason debate's
No,
supposed
it
to be
is
so it's
because
like
you're
silly.
citing like alternative causes, but we're winning that debate.
Yeah,
is
sure.
unique.
The cyberlink, what's
because
the
we've
proper
won
response?
links to your app. in
The
class.
cyberlink, what's the proper response to cyber attacks?
Yeah, it's a question of the alternative. We think that the alternative is necessarily able to resolve the kind of
How?
root causes because the forms of globalist
So
systems.
we get cyber attacked. What happens?
It's not a question of cyber attacks because the alternative deconstructs the idea of the nation
How?
state. That is what cosmopolitan democracy is. It's a
Right, so you
de-ontologization.
fiat cosmopolitan democracy.
No, we don't fiat that, obviously.
sure.
We said injecting
The link
academia, which is
above
cross-sex.
that,
Please
the
listen.
link above that about deterrence, I guess I'm confused what you impact your deterrence. What's the reason? for
Yeah,
this?
so our argument is that deterrence and deterrence conflicts are structurally inevitable, which is a conceded claim out of the 2AC. Our argument is that the forms of warfare that you engage in are necessarily the next step in that process, which means that you cannot solve,
Okay,
but
why
rather
does
it
it
simply
impact-
smooths the process of colonial extraction
Sure.
based off of those spheres of influence.
Can we take like 2 seconds to go?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Oh, wait, this stops?
Yeah. It's just gonna be this. Okay. 5:35. No new cards.
Oh, well, just the Eigenberg card.
Yeah.
Get in case.
1 sec, I gotta do my launch order.
Is case just advantage 1 or 2 or both?
Yeah. It's just advantage. No, it's actually advantage 2.
Okay.
Do y'all know if there's water outside?
Yeah, so you know the bathroom area?
No,
Like,
I
okay, if
got
you go
lost.
straight out, there's 2 bathrooms. In that same hallway, if you go all the way to the right, there's one.
Okay, I'm gonna try and
Out the door
find.
and to the left, up the stairs.
Okay, I'm gonna try and find that in a reasonable amount of time.
Then if
Might
you
be
ask the
lost.
front desk, they'll also give you one, but that's fine.
Okay, we'll do.
You're a senior, right? Where are you going for college?
What about you?
Nice, congrats.
What about you?
I'm deciding. You two are What's your major?
I'm not immediately convinced that I would have found this immediately outside the door. This place is too convenient.
It's like a maze.
It is.
Everything looks the
That's
same
why we were
too.
so late here, because like we literally could not.
Yeah, and
find
it's
it.
like the labels of the doors were like weird places.
Yeah.
Like, there's like so many doors at the same time.
And then there was like hundreds of people that we
Yeah.
just had to walk through.
You're once again missing a Josh.
I saw it. Please tell me.
It's a constant.
Do you record the cheese? Yeah. It's like a full
Because my computer might die.
We could move over there.
Do you need a charger?
An outlet. I have a charger, but
Yeah, we could just slide over there. Hang out with Mr. Hammer.
Switch tables.
Yeah.
that's true. That's
We
gonna
can,
take
or
a
you
lot
can
of
switch
work.
if you'll need it.
That's gonna take a lot of
Yeah,
work.
that's.
I might just kind of sit
Yeah.
in the corner.
You could also just slide over.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I think I'll just like sit in the corner.
You said advantage 2, right? K advantage 2.
Yeah, case. I'll sign those just where.
Yeah, I'll get on
Get in case. terms of the beginning of my first word. They see Eikenberry. Their reliance on Eikenberry proves our criticism. He has defended the U.S. empire despite acknowledging slavery and racism that it brought. LASA is operating under the very same logic. Anything that is justified so long as it prevents execution. Morpho 21. The humanitarization of war has normalized European imperialism. John Eikenberry calls a hierarchical order. The liberal characteristic shift of the moral orientation. Eikenberry and Daniel duty to argue directly liberalism may have been associated with historically imperialism, slavery, racism. They insist that long arc of history does bend towards justice. They thanks to activism and commitments to liberals. And extending the issue, okay, there are fates far worse than death. LASA is imperative to prevent extinction as a Faustian bargain that continually eliminates the difference between in search for ever elusive safety. Every time the 1AR and 2AR says extinction outweighs, that is the exact moral blackmail that one see grows and that puts the moral consideration in the back burner in the name of some future safety that almost always that's always almost at the hand of but never quite present. The impact is a reduction of life to a never ending search for safety and the security at the expense of enjoyment or fulfillment that outweighs in judge case laws of difference in knowledge over other forms of life out of utilitarian maximization. They have terminally failed to answer the argument. It's not about calculus of extinction impacts, but rather the frame of analysis of the user judgment too little too late when all they extended irreversibility. But we've already turned that frame, saying that the mathematization is used to put smaller impacts on the background. Any humanitarian benefits can outweigh, but it's wrong since those systems get used to replicate the imperialist violence such as spatialization of the nation state. On the alternative is the world system contemporary IR is framed around militarism and imperialism, but cosmopolitan movements exist and institutions are free for all of them. It's a question of injecting that theory into the research agenda. To try and argue real politics has been disastrous, and we build capacity to move beyond them. That all looks like democratic management of global events, which removes the pretext of action to the war. The alternative is to break down the dichotomies and remove sacred liberation because they are not states anymore. We solve the under our frame, and then we solve the absence of domestic force that removes instead of the misuse of coercive power. That lessens tension and fosters the internal democratization that solves every internal link in the 1AC. Also solves the cooperation of it because it's a shift to broader cooperation. Any actors and NATO aid to synchronize one another based on nationalist economies between the Eastern and Western nation born out of ideological difference. Each must think on their own to compete with one another, and so by doing so oppose their opposite, which causes war. Nations go to war because they view themselves as individual units. They must protect themselves for their own. And influence is wrong. It's just a question of whether economy can overcome things currently, but it's a question of frame of analysis, so it doesn't matter. And their impacts don't outweigh the impacts of the critique which they conceded. And on these utopian first is arbitrary. No threshold for what utopia is, and it links to the permutation just as much because they link fiat through the Senate and House, and to its internal link and waving away attempts to make the world more peaceful as a pie in the sky. Utopia proves that F is enshrined methodological nationalism. 3, it's not utopian. Our evidence says that ruins already exist in the school. It's just a question of scholarship, and for no office, they can still answer the alternative by saying nation states are good, which they did. And the corresponding epistemological fiat is but it's good to keep the practice research and testing the F from multiple angles and testing the F research episode framework. They say pick, don't link, not a pick, or at least not going for it. And the case when the 2AR inevitably stands up and says, on case. When the 2AR inevitably stands up and whines about dropping the case impacts, remember the case proves here policy failure to all of their impacts. We've directly turned the deterrence scenario by proving that states will always enact in deterrence, which will lead to always turning into war and always require for specialization, and also turning defendant ones through because the international law and cooperation. It only works through to spatialize the subject and to organize the world into a certain manner, which is why cooperation occurs, which obviously the all solves because it's a more broader communication. On evidence specifically, and if you would conceded their use of fear in Russia is the recreation of Cold War epistemology in order to justify spatialization. This is proven by the U.S. internal policy deeming Russia as more significant than the independent impact of the spatialization of Asia, which justifies imperialist lawfare and imperialist policy. Even if you believe that the Russian impact is true, like we said in cross-sects, their epistemology that they forward from these impacts is an independent reason to reject the case because it outweighs any sort of material impact that they cannot solve because obviously it is oops, sorry. Do you want me to say?
Did you do the turn on Russia? It's like framing causes war itself.
Yeah, so on case, the framing of the thesis of the case, the framing of Russia's enemy is inevitably going to recreate warfare because of its sort of revision of a non-starter war is always spatialized and never, like they said in Russia. Our whole point is that you always can not explain state behavior because of the two anecdotes like a national identity. We're winning a structural root cause of the idea of revisionism, which is based on spatial leadership processes and territorial desire. It's only a question of how we solve that, which means you default to the alternative that having engaged in the same logic that causes conflict over territory by engaging in our attempt to recreate favorable balance of power. Our argument is that there is never going to be a favorable balance of power. States are always moving towards territory, which means that their cultural deterrence will only be involved in more dangerous action. wanna sit on this side?
Just move the
Hold on. Make sure you can see it. No, just put it. Oh, yeah, sorry. We're just like rolling.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine.
2 seconds.
You're the one who's moving.
Advantage 2, advantage 1, the K. On the K, I'm going to start on framework, the alternative, and then substance of the K.
You said framework alternative and something.
Yes.
Something.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Yeah.
A second. 403, my bad.
You said, what is your advantage?
Second advantage, first advantage, K, framework, the alternative, and then substance of the K.
Framework, alternative, substance. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Is anybody not ready?
1 second. Okay.
NATO deterrence is faltering due to divisions over PMCs, Ocean new commitments, crucial burning Russian escalation, otherwise extinction. No Russian link. Winning Russia is aggressive, disproves and means it's not securitizing. Any epistemology we use is good because it stops nuclear war. Drop every empiric proves, expand outside the regional sphere in Syria, Africa, Central Asia, India, Ukraine, etc. All prove unique motivation because expansionism is the only way to explain those actions. They have no counter explanation. The carbon before Ukraine does not explain any of those examples. They have not done any explanatory counter to explain why their theory results in any Russian aggression. Finish one. Increasing cyber attacks, nuclear miscalculation, level due to lack of classification for private military contractors or cause misperceptions. Extinction do not go negative on presumption. There's no explanation of how the theory of power explains the ab or case being true disproves the theory of power. Framework. When the app against a competitor alternative that cannot result in the app, they get links to implement the plan. Anything else costs the research, at least in academic echo chamber. Sidestepping the burden of Jordan is arbitrary and self-serving. Since it moves app offense, fairness is the impact a quantifiable of securing the plan costs the research replaces it with an academic vacuum. Second, the ballot solves. You're talking about in-route equity, not out-route inequality. Third, links do not come first. The process of debating why the topic is good, even if one side is correct. Argument skills, researchability, and clash are exportable beyond one round. Their model destroys it. The resolution means only the plan has a predictable states the point. Our intern solves all their offense. It can cave epistemology, but the impacts of the link have to implicate the plan. No cost-benefit analysis can't resolve it. A model debate does not stop the ability of teams to use cost-benefit analysis or for international relations overview. B, impact turn cost-benefit analysis is good regardless of what we do when the activity, which is the skills work. I did above. Role of ballot, determine who did the better debating. Anything else cannot solve. Ballot is not key. A, no spill up. No one is monitoring this independent debate. Ballot only affirms who did the better debating, not who is morally true. Second, technically debate outweighs. People think we lost the round because the debater did not execute well, not because we made morally incorrect arguments. Third, non-unique. They are not a unique disruption. Critiques are read all the time. Multiple rounds. This proves that no spacing did that. A, intern solves can still be the K. They need because it links to implement a computation that was above. B, process, divorce, and content clash. Acts the large racial link to resulting in better ethical advocates because the process in depth research on both sides results in better self-reflexivity. Different asks each round, different rounds, topics, etc. disprove the content being relevant. Third, no impact, no spill up. That was the ballot keys from above. No dematerialization is that. A, non-starter. No actually between the examples the of black debaters. Second, violence cannot be resolved by the ballot or judge intervention checks. If you were truly racist or violent anyway, the judge should sufficiently check it. But the content individual rates are relevant. A, switch side teams go for hedge good, then hedge bad, read chaos, and the T. Second, judging debates. There's assume team solves because technicality sells above. Third, all costs of school, family, religion, the media, etc. all that way. Fourth, competition, speaker points, speech times, etc. Proves to read arguments to win, not because we agree with them. The defense, A, not predictable, can't weigh the app. B, no app bias, offset by not being able to access the app, which all the researchers move because we assume we get to weigh the app when we enter the space. Third, no all calls this T is predictable because of question of the plan pictures they obfuscate distance and counterplans can be accessed because we outweigh them via the app. Fourth, not self-correcting resolution is the only predictable status point, which is above. App choice is not solved because they have not given us the app, which is key. Skills and pattern was answered above. Debate is not unique to subject formation. We can access discussion on cartography elsewhere through class lectures, etc. Or the researcher cannot solve it because they cannot force debates to be about cartography. Now, the substance of debate proper. The first deterrence link. A, impact turns the impact of, oh my god. A, not inevitable. The app solves Russian deterrence. They have no words for future scenarios. Second, death later is not reason death now is because the app is still a good idea. Third, applies just as hard. If deterrence fails, inevitable and takes out any ultimate claims. Fourth, permutation solves to overcome supreme revealed. Any seventh claims is answer. Framework only have to defend the plan. They have no way to solve deterrence absent beyond a global world order, at least world peace, which means it's tried app, drop pressure, the revisionists, and going to expand. They don't have an alternative explanation, which means it's tried no cyberlink. A, case peers risk is high, should be prevented now. The Tracy Maker evidence indicates increasing capability gas in EW and empirical cyber attacks on Crimea and Ukraine demonstrate new attacks are imminent. Only the app can deter by credibility as country. Second, securitization as cyber is good insofar as it solves nuclear war. Discussing nuclear fragility creates incentive for denuclearization as Peloponnese. Third, not inevitable. Deterrence is key. Tracy Snevra indicates empirically when states have responded to Russian aggression, they backed down and proven by Turkey shooting down a fighter jet in 2015. Specifically in the context of cybersecurity is good. The shred of evidence indicates lack of cyber deterrence resulted in cyber war against Estonia and Georgia. All this disproves this deterrence leak as well because it proves that deterrence is effective. The alternative realism. My bad. Double bind. Either A, they have to get some level of feel on global alternative, which links it as bad. B, or its framework has zero impact because debate does not interpret a private mindset and international field is a voting issue. Endorsing mindset justifies chaotic world peace and the unpredictable because you can't Number one, this last argument that we get answers is relevant and feels unpredictable, but it does prove winning a U.S. local order is good and it patterns decay independently. Extinction outweighs A, irreversible, precludes future improvement. Second, objective, any other metric devolves into genocide, but all ethical frameworks conclude extinction as a necessary priority. The background argument is circular. It says it's unethical because it's unethical. Our theory means to prioritize the act, they don't turn it. There's no explanation of how they act is specific and to extinction. Now, the nation state is good and sustainable. A, nationalism is ever present post World War II, European independence, and sentiment is only rising. Second, economic markets, regionalization, and currency peace alternative nationalism are infeasible in the current economic climate. Third, creates egalitarianism, peace at home, overwhelms the violence abroad, unifying national identity, folks want to overcome domestic turmoil. That's the linchpin for the evidence. It's not sustainable. Climate, drop the gross evidence. Capitalism creates innovation, which decreases emissions. And extend the Eikenberry card. The U.S. has been historically anti-imperialistic, failed to looking European decolonization, towards Germany, Italy, and Russia from expansion. Has legitimized global indigenous movements. That's the Eikenberry stuff. The Morpheus evidence does not answer it. Dropped examples where U.S. interventions are good and better than the alternative. It's not the imperialism is good, but the U.S. left word that the all forecloses this. But we have more authors like Kane, which takes it out. Not just Eikenberry.
5:45.
terminally ahead and the 2AR cannot come back. The 1AR has dropped. That you should disregard all proximate cause analysis because we've impact turned that form of the frame. This was flagged under the overview at the bottom of the overview, though they cannot come back. This is a form of Western rationality and spatiality, though we've already critiqued that assumes space should be organized by those in power because they're rational, responsible actors. Conceded they are not, which you should weigh our theory of power of specific causes of analysis because Western actors are always already implicated in the forms of spatialization practices that we're talking about because they have conceded that our thesis of how states are ontologically formed in practices of spatialization beginning from the early modern period and how the after forms of religion were replaced by spatialization practices and the forms of Eurocentric cultures that implicated all of Europe and continues to the modern day. They conceded this, which means that the 2AR is dead in the water because all the offense that they're going to try to go for on the 2AR does not matter when we're winning and controlling internal link to all of the deterrence offense that we're going for the deterrence section. That means that they have zero unique offense that the K has not already turned, and if they do, they already solves. I will start with the alternative because it frames the way you think about the rest of the debate. The alternative is a world systems, which is a form of cosmopolitan democracy, a democratic management of global events, deconstruct the ontologization of individuality in favor of plural relations. This is as close as you can get to solving the app. Archibuki says that cosmo movements already exist, so it's only a question of injecting scholarship about cosmo into academic spaces, which is a conceded warrant from the 1AR key to creating waves outside which deconstructs the nation state. The 2AR is going to try to sound very persuasive on how the security logics that we decline. Obviously, I mean that they can solve nuclear war. This is a non-issue because we're winning that the controlling internal link to all of those threats is the ontologization in the singular units that states exist as in the first place in the ways they are perceived, which means that we solve all their offenses key to creating waves outside, which deconstructs the nation state. We're winning a decisive root cause claim. The nation state spatialization taxes are the root cause of all their impacts. Winning that we deconstruct those solves the root cause, which they can see that we do solve that root cause in the first place because we solve our own link that the 2AR tries to make no spillover. A possibility does not matter because we're winning that simply the imagination of those movements in the first place is good. The 2AC had zero. The 2AR, 1AR had zero game on it, which means that it's already legitimate. It resolves all the security logic of the offense that they're going for because it's conceded the deontologization thesis. We already impact on the proximate cause stuff, so we ought to win. Private actor fiat does not matter because we've conceded that the injection of our theory via the ballot is itself good, which is the internal link to all of our offenses. It means we're not simply imagining that these movements happening as an opposing fiat or worldview to the app itself, which because it starts in this room here with the key to all of our offense that the alt exists now because movements already exist, which means that it's only a question of the neg ballot. We're winning terminal root cause and the link debate, which we'll do now. Wars over deterrence are inevitable because of our thesis of spatialization. The ebb and flow of deterrent nations is an ontologically fixed part of nation states. It means that conflicts over spheres of influence or deter are structurally inevitable. It takes out all of their framing about how the deterrence of cyber attacks is good because if they cross-apply any sort of offense on the cyber attack stuff, we're already winning because they are trying to deter cyber attacks in itself. The 1AC forwards a view of deterrence that is sufficient to solve their offense. They've eternally conceded the root cause. They harden spatialization by further defining the nation state in the context of the other. They lose that the US, Russia, and NATO are two sides of the same coin, which is a conceded warrant. They have no explanation of how Putin is aggressive. Only we can do that through the spatialization text of the 1AC, which means that we've outframed all of the revisionism warrants that were done in the 2NR, but that does not answer the thesis of our argument. Anyways, the impact of sovereign violence, yeah, becomes the next step in the biopolitical socialization of the globe into Western models that forcing the elimination of difference until everyone complies with Western guidelines and eliminates individuality by controlling the social order. It turns all of their case arguments. They miss that deterrence is untamable, which solves all of the offense. Their examples of deterrence succeeding do not contend with the links of question of epistemological justifications, and they're wrong since they already rise to new threats in those same ways as those threats eternally re-emerge. Now the extinction decay is an independent link to the decay. There are fates worse than death, and they are a continuation of policy that puts conventional war and structural violence on the back burner. The link has been mishandled through the debate. Util itself is not an answer because it's not about whether their calculus is materially valid, but rather the epistemological justifications for claiming that extinction impacts already higher forms of suffering, which they have conceded that warrant. It means that util we are winning a functional critique of the way that util logics operate. They say revisionism. They have not grappled with the thesis of the critique. They have conceded that revisionism is inevitable in the scope beyond anecdotes like invasion that is because of structural root cause claims. The idea of revisionism as the material manifestation of spatialization means the app engages the same logic that caused new conflicts over territory. Now, framework, I do not need to win it because the 1AR has reinterpreted the debate into being in the forms of how we only need to win an impact to the plan itself, which we are already doing because we are already always already a critique of the forms of deterrence that the plan itself engages in. We have won a controlling root cause claim to the causes exponentially more nuclear wars than they can ever solve, which means that we don't need to win framework because we already meet their interpretation in the first place.
episode.
Advantage 2 then decay. Is anybody not ready?
There is no chance you vote negative. The choice you read 2 cards justifying U.S. intervention in U.S. global order. 2 are framing issues too little too late because they justify spatialization bad by saying it's imperialist pro evidence has impact turned cosmopolitanism and it's a reason a strong nation state is good. You know, this must link to them because the one that are literally used this case, us getting this impact turn as a justification for why they got to be at the all. The prior question is how they resolve any of their offense. Spoiler, they can't. Because either A, conceding no impact to subject information or framework, zeros the injunction of scholarship having anything to do with real world application because the alternative cannot fill up, or B, they do not get the alternative because it's the utopian fiat in which they have conceded is bad and a reason to reject the team, which outweighs, which I'll do below on the K, the advantage. Russia war is going down now. The offensive through restricting units, deterrence postures, defensive from nuclear extinction to impact turn justification for all the links. They have no explanation for why the 3 power explains Russian aggression into status quo or reason why the alternative can resolve any living sort of true extinction. Definitely outweighs comes first to the objective framework. Any other back calculations is slippery. So that quickly develops a genocide or one activities parties over others. All the logic is circular. It's paternalized assumes sunlight has provided others in backward just said is not conceded. They drop that it's circular, i.e. it says it's ethical because it's ethical. Obviously, when our impact calculus is more obvious when our impacts are worse. You should prefer them over other impacts, which takes us out of this next argument. There are not fates worse than drop. They drop that makes it irreversible. It's just forecloses any other opportunity for resistance, i.e. thinks it always get better with their evidence, but they will review the ones who are paternalizing says think to not ever to die. That's super not a good thing to say, especially because they dropped the irreversible stuff above. Now, no root cause argument. We did not drop this flow check. Everyone go back to the advantages. Alex said this in the literal overview, which said, quote, outweighs, it's going down now, they take too long to solve. It's a time frame argument about how proximate causes still come first, but they still don't have anyone to solve because they're not being the alternative. Okay. The only relevant thing from framework is the sub information mate, which goes conceded and outweighs. He takes out all solvency because voting negative does not actually make their alternative implemented, which will let they have to win to get out of the theory debate. 2 ones and going for A, all causes. All causes, school, family, religion, and the media are more influential than 90 minutes debate around another opportunity to make B. Switch side, we have so many debates over the course of our careers, and inevitably going to go for contradictory arguments, hedge good, then hedge bad, read chaos, and go for framework, etc. Even if they were right, individual debates affected by some theory judging would have devolved in more chaos as we contradict ourselves over time. Zeros, alt solvency, drop, zeros, alt solvency, takes out any alt solvency. Now, the 2 are also concedes the permutation. Alex said the deterrence link, when she said it was a link of remission, if you don't want to value the rest of this K, this is an easy way out because of the introduction of scholarship was all they need to solve. There's no reason they actually need the ballot to resolve it. The deterrence link, the alternative proper, they're not going to get to utopian fiat world peace or to solve the app. They definitely have to link to this or all the information work I just did. Zeros on solvency because they're just factually wrong. The introduction of scholarship this week did nothing, which proves they don't get it. Beyond private actor, natural beyond mindsets is impossible to garner offense kids because they are infinite mindsets the negative can decide to endorse. And they obviously debates over the mechanism for debates about goals, which there's a lack of reciprocal evidence for that measures clash, because the app can never get back in the game when you have to compare it to everyone stopping, dropping, and loving each other. They drop its terminal impact. As for the 2, as for the 1 area, that are arguments between returns is the destruction condition for J8. It works from the ground up. It means it must outweigh. Now, the deterrence is proper. It's a non-starter. A, functionally dropped deterrence works. 2 in our asserts. Our examples are false and vague. Asserts the theory of power is true. Did not do the work or application where the theory of power explains why Russia backed down in Turkey started on Friday, 2015. That's 186 Nergova. If the theory of power was true, Russia would have escalated in response opposed to de-escalation, and we'd all be dead. This was the one I worked in the cyber link, which is probably applicable, and the 2 just misses it. B, alt solvency. The alt cannot resolve abuse when deterrence fails now. Absent the theory debate, if we win, the alt was abusive and that they don't get it, then there's no uniqueness for the link. Try or die app because the uncertainty of whether their theory of power is true, but you know for sure Russia is an imminent threat absent the plan. C, no turns case explanation of what this means in the context of the app solvency beyond a certain theory of power, which do not do or for them because you don't know what it means. Now, the theory of power does not take out the app, it's not applied to the app until the 2 Alex preempted this cross application of the 1 Russian cross applied examples of Russian aggression, ask how the alternative resolves it. The 2 just don't answer this question, it should be 0 in the context of the app. Now, the U.S.-led global order is good, it's sustainable, and it's a discount to the alternative because they're alternative cosmopolitan, abolishes those borders, makes us all start loving each other. Obviously, that doesn't solve the app because of impact turning through imperialism being justified in these specific instances, and it's an impact turn links. That's important if you think we've lost all this above, but conclude we win this assessment debate just for an app because their scholarship is wrong and we've impact turned most of it. Now, the U.S. has historically been anti-imperialistic, facilitating European decolonization, supporting Germany, Italy, and Russia from expansion, has legitimized global indigenous movements. That's like clear evidence or examples of the examples of counter-imperialism are lacking in the 2 just assertions that imperialism is bad, but if they all the cards focus on outliers, only arguments analyze the overall trend decreases in child mortality, HDI, and violence in countries that host troops. That's the cane evidence, which proves that we have other authors who all agree with us, which means even if you're going to work for them, give them the more full evidence, they don't get it in the 2 so you have other authors that way. They also drop all the work Alex says about why the nation state is good and sustainable. Nationalism is ever-present principle of European independence system and only rising. It's a Linden Florence evidence, which says nationalism can create solve violence globally because we all start building bonds with people near us. It also proves it's inevitable absent fiat because we all economic systems and regulations of the current government systems means it's happening in the status quo. So if alternative to overcome it, absent fiat, which I did above. Ballot can't solve. They also drop that people think we lose because of technical reasons, not because of truth of arguments. I agree to arguments because they win, not because we believe in them, but it takes out any content solving arguments. The ballot can't obviously overcome that because they have no reason why this debate is key, nor why the ballot is key. Also, I'm considering the bolts around something to takes us out because it's a question of switch set. Anything else?
to both teams for making it to quarterfinals of the Tournament of Champions. The decision is a 3-0 for the affirmative. Go ahead and start with those ones. I end up voting F on the impact turn to cosmopolitanism. I might agree that the neg doesn't need a winning framework to critique the plan, but the F's claim that the alt can't access impacts if the neg loses framework is pretty compelling. I think the 2AR is mitigating a ton of alt solvency with more textured demonstrations of the research and evaluative paradigms that emerge from fiat-based clash debates. I think the app exploits neg uncertainty about the mechanism of the alt to more directly establish the relationship of IR research to the mechanics of debate as an intellectual activity/exercise premised on structural argumentation. The Eikenberry imperialism extension combined with state good push on alt solvency mean that I'm at least unclear about the neg's vision of international conflict resolution. While deterrence inevitable is a compelling claim, filling in the cascade of consequences via the negative's intervention in such a paradigm lacks comparison with the state-based world system the app contextualizes their epistemology and research practices.
I can go. First of all, excellent debating, great tournament. I haven't judged you all, but the evidence is great. So good luck in the future. If you decide to debate in the future, college and stuff like that. Biggest problem for me is the alt. Like, it's unclear what the alt even is, really. It's like movements for plural relations. It's like, what even are those movements? Like, I think there were examples in the 2NC that I heard but could not flow because I was having difficulty flowing the negative speeches. They're definitely not in the 2NR. It's very unclear how this solves the impact of the link, which is over deterrence. And this is relevant because the framework is not in the 2NR. So two other things which are relevant is like no subject formation, so it's unlikely that the alt solvency argument, which is made in the debate, which is like debater's key would be successful. And the the flip side of this is like, if the alt is just the movements thing, then the defense to utopian fiat is just like, doesn't make sense anymore, and then it would activate that as like an app condition to get rid of the alt, because, the movements alone coming now, nothing to make them successful absent fiat. So implication of this being linked non-unique. Another thing I thought about is like case is faster than the impact of the link, which is like an argument that the app is advanced throughout the debate. Like, you can only die once, Russia war imminent, over deterrence causes war down the line, who cares if we're dead. So then I thought about the util thing, because the neg has this magnitude K that, like, for what it's worth, the app is never big. Like, it's just like extinction first, well, actually, okay, like, I say never debating, but like, like there is one silver bullet app argument that is just like completely tautological, which I agree with. It's like, why is it true that, their extinction framing puts your impact on the back burner? Like, beyond this one argument, I don't really think the app has much business on like impact defense of this or like impact to link non-unique. But another thing to consider is like, I was very unclear on what your structural impact was. Like, spatialization is bad. Why for me? Like, I get like that's like kind of unsatisfying because it's like the whole overview is like, well, equals like elimination of individuality and stuff like that. But like, I don't know, like it's kind of difficult to conceptualize like why that's a bad thing, honestly, like, given the way that the debate is going. If it's like, well, it's organized hierarchically, like, like LAOK, then like, yeah, but then link defense stuff or null fails stuff. And then thought about the neg link, and I think it's more of an observation about the status quo than a link to the plan. It's like ebb and flow of deterrence, like Russia equals the United States. It's like, I guess, but like, why does that cause war? And the app internal link, is deterrence works. So you'd have to be debating that like way more to win.
Yeah, my decision is virtually identical. It comes down for me basically like the app solves an impact. I don't think the neg does. I agree with all the alt link stuff. The other thing that, and this mattered a lot, the like spatialization not really having a terminal impact for you all, matters a lot to me because they're like definitely impact turning the shit out of that, right? Like they're saying that framing all nation state spatialization as bad is bad, basically because there are good guys and bad guys. The good guys being the US and their allies, and the bad guys being scary revisionist states like Russia. And then they like, you know, I feel like it was telegraphed pretty clearly that they were like gonna go for just like LIO good, the US is the good guy. So they like do all their like reasons why that's true, which means that, you know, which is a justification for how they're like ideologically demarcating the international sphere. So, like, I don't know, even if the alt, if the alt was able to resolve your offense, I still think that like maybe I just vote on the impact turn. Although there is a chance that like maybe, like I think you like maybe are winning your root cause stuff, but I just like that to me doesn't matter if you can't solve it, but they can still at least solve their advantage. So there's like still a world where even if they like get their impact turn, you win the root cause stuff. If you have your alt, maybe I can still vote nay, but like no alt, there's like it is. I just don't know how to resolve your offense.
Post like 1AR, obviously the 1AR left like very little room for the 2NR to work within. Do you think just like going for framework and like one of the scenario or fiat case? Okay.
I think you gotta.
Yeah.
So little alt in the block. It's like we all have basically set up the alt as framework from the beginning of the debate. So I think framework is like definitely necessary.
That's why I was like the 2NR. I was like I'm not. Because it. Yeah, I mean it was basically like the alt kind of just was framework. I didn't unless you were just gonna like go for it's okay for us to fiat this shit and we'll just fiat it. But yeah, I think you just have to go for framework in the second R.
Yeah. And I think the way like I framed it right was uncertainty over not just fiat but like the mechanism in general. I think that's to say like I didn't need you to really like answer back what we aren't fiat of course and then tell me what you are, but really just know your answer so that you can start building internal links here that are germane to the way their vision of sovereignty, statehood, even the Eikenberry evidence, right? Like I think y'all have some goods, like at least decent arguments up front about like complicity in racial cap and extractive violence, right? But you need to be developing those internal links into or out of the framework debate. They have to lead there one way or another.
That makes sense. We're good.
Great tournament.
Thank you.
Lots more